Hello, this is the second video of the Pixinsight batch pre-processing script tutorial. And what I'd like to show here in this video is how you would combine a second night's data with the first night's data using the BPP tool. Also, I'd like to demonstrate using the dark library and your previous flat for the previous night. So I've just set up a little bit of this data so it can be used for this demonstration. So if we pretend this is our dark library, and normally this would be in a directory higher up, but I've just put it all here for the sake of this example. So inside the dark library, I've now got my 1 second darks and my 240 second, and in my flat library, I've got a master flat for the hydrogen alpha filter. So I'm going to be using those for the next batch process. What I'd like to also show is how I use a registration image. Now, if you remember in the first video, I chose the first light image of that particular data set. The trick here is, in order to use an image for a registration image, you need to have a calibrated image. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take the registered calibrated image from the first night, and I'm going to use that as my registration image. So I'd like to show you how I do that. So I'm going to go into the PI directory, go into the registered folder for the hydrogen alpha, and I'm going to choose the first image here. Now you can double check that this is a registered file and calibrated by the suffix of the file. You see here there's a C and an R that tells me it's calibrated and registered. And I'm in the hydrogen alpha and I want frame number 1. So I'm going to take that image, I'm going to copy it, and what I'm going to do is in my work folder for this particular data set, I am going to create a new directory called reg. And here I like to store, I copy that file here for my registration image. So if I ever question which is the image I used to register, I know right away it's that one. And you'll see when I use the tool, the batch preprocessing tool, that I'll be able to directly jump to that folder. So now we just have to look at this directory I've created. It's called Imaging Computer Data from Night 2. So all we're going to do is pretend that I had a second night of imaging, and we're going to look in there, and this is the data that's from that second night. Now to make this simple, I'm going to use the flats from the first night, and just for the sake of this demonstration, I'll be using only the lights from the second night. So what I normally do is, so pretend this is on my imaging computer. Somehow we got to transfer that back to our work folder. So whether you use a USB or Wi-Fi, I'm just going to simulate doing that now. So I'm on my imaging computer and I've got lights from a second night as an example. So I'm going to take these lights. I'm going to cut them for this example, and I'm going to go into my light folder. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste them right here. And what I do is, if I'm not ready to process, I just leave it here. And I know that these images haven't been dealt with yet. And if you remember, I've created the HA directories here previously. In here, these are all the ones from the first night. You see, this is from the 4th. And if I go here, this is all the data I have from the 5th. So this just helps me stay organized. So I've transferred it from the imaging computer onto my work folder, and maybe a couple days go by and I'm ready to process it, but I've got it now here. So at this point, we can go into the batch preprocessing tool, and it's just a matter of bringing all this data in here. So I'm going to add my lights. And again, now in this case, we're going to go to the light folder. And I'm not going to that HA folder. I'm taking from here, and I'm going to use those. So these are the lights from light 2, or from night 2. So the flats now. In this case, I'm going to go to my working directory, and I'm going to go to my library now. So because I made a master flat the night before, I'm going to use that one. And I'm going to check off use master flat. So you see that becomes a star and it's bold. So I know I'm using a master file. Now this is already calibrated. So because it's already calibrated, I don't need to add my dark flats anymore. So that's important to remember. Now I'll go to the darks, and here I'll go to my dark library, and I'm going to just choose the 242nd one to match the lights. And again, I'm going to click Use Master Dark. So in this case, I do not have to add the other darks. The flats have already been calibrated. So these are all the settings I need to do here, and I need to choose my registration image, if you remember. So all I have to do is go here, go into my working folder, and I don't have to think too much. I know all I have to do is go into the reg folder and choose that one. And for the output folder, I'm going to go back to my working directory and choose the PI directory, just like I did before. And I'm all set. As a reminder, keep the optimized dark frames off with the CMOS cameras, and make sure these two are checked for the master dark and master flat. So I'll click diagnostic again, and I'll get the message, no bias frames detected, which is great. And I'm going to run the batch preprocessor now. So what this will do, it's going to continue to add back to that Pixinsight directory, the PI directory that I created for the second nights. And it's going to be a lot faster now because it doesn't have to create the dark master anymore or the flat master. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rename the old light master. I'm going to call it night 1. I like to do this just to compare the two data sets from the two nights. This isn't combining the image yet. It's important to understand. All we're really doing now is calibrating the data, and I am going to integrate the second nights just as an example so I can compare the first night's integration to the second night's. Then step 2 will be to reintegrate the combination of both. So you actually don't have to integrate the image for this example, but I just like to do that in my working set. It's nice to compare data, see how it's changed from one night to the next. If you combine it all right away, you don't see that difference. It's going to add the rest of these files into the same directories that were here. So if I look in the registered HA folder, you see now I've got lights from the first night and lights from the second night. Now it's important to keep these unique so it doesn't get confused. So I like to prefix everything with the date. And it just keeps all your data together in one set. I used to have different folders for different days, but it was getting very messy, especially when I went to recombine everything. Okay, so it's complete now. Just going to drag that onto the desktop in case you need to reload this batch processor. And if I look into my Pixinsight directory, we're going to look in the master directory. Now, you see, because I didn't have to create new dark masters, there's they're not in here anymore from the first night because I moved them to the dark library. And here, now we have the light from night 1. So if I add that here, that's my night 1. And this is theoretically my night 2. So I can just rename that night 2. And I've got night 2 here. Okay, let me just close my rejection maps here. So if you wanted to, you can just stretch them both and compare the two data sets. So you can see this data here is shifted a little bit. So if I put these over one another, flip between them, I don't think I aligned them exactly. There we go. So you can see, and this becomes more of an analysis. You say, okay, was the second night's better than the first? And you can review based on scene conditions and whatnot. But for this example, I now have two data sets, but right now I have two separate images, and the idea is to combine the two, right? So with the batch preprocessing, we've basically done that. And in the registered folder, you'll see all my images are there. So what I can do now is I can just minimize these. What I can do is I can load up the image integration tab or process, and all I need to do is add all the files in the registration directory or the registered directory. So I select all, and these are all calibrated, they're all registered. All I need to do is select the rejection algorithm. And that's it. So as you can see, it's cached all those images from before, so this process is relatively quick. And if you were to have 3 nights or 4 nights or 5 nights, you just do the same thing. You just keep dragging them back into a folder where you're familiar with, and make sure you assign the same Pixinsight directory, and you can easily add multiple nights this way. So if I look at my rejection maps, that's the high, that's the low, and now if I stretch my combination image, it should be a little brighter. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but it is. So if I take the second night and I compare to the combo, there's much less noise here. Oops. So if I scroll in here, so I'm going to rename this combo, and if I compare that with one of the single nights, you can see it's a little bit noisy and a lot smoother. So you'll need to save this image because this doesn't save it. So if I'll save this in my project directory. Not sure, I usually put it in different spots, but for this example, I'll just save it here in the outside. I'll call it HA combo. And that's my combination for the 2 nights. Now, if I had a third night, I would call it combo 3, then combo 4, depending on how far I want to go with it. Thanks for watching.